Welcome to Truth and Liberty. Thank you for joining our daily live call-in broadcast, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to the issues, and you can call in and get your questions answered in real time. According to the Bible, it's the truth you know that sets you free. So call in today to get answers, information, and resources to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and the world. And now here's your host, Richard Harris.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, and your host today. It's awesome to have you with us, and we have got a really amazing program lined up for you today, as we're going to take a deep dive, if you will, into progressive state politics. Particularly, what I want to do is open a window for you to see the radical left agenda in a solid blue state like Colorado and what is actually happening to our country at the state level. You know, so many people that do pay any attention to politics, they think mostly about national politics, and they see the headlines on, USA Today and CNN and this sort of thing, and they have no idea of everything that's going on at the state legislatures. But the fact of the matter is that we've got 50 states, and each one of them has a legislature, and every one of them is active and considering laws, fighting over laws and regulations and things like that that affect our lives. And it's the transformation that is happening in the blue states, primarily in the state houses, that is rotting the nation. I don't know how else to put it. And then those things work their way out at the state level and then eventually make it up to the federal level with Joe Biden and the liberals in Congress. But we have got to be aware of what's happening in our states because this is affecting families and children in schools and, crime and even immigration and environmental policies and all kinds of other things. So I have with me today on set here at Andrew Womack Ministries and Truth and Liberty is our own state senator and our good friend Mark Baisley. And you've served as our state representative for, I think, 8 years, and then now you are our state senator here in District 4 in Teller and Douglas County, and it's so good to have you on set today.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here. And there's 6 more counties beyond the 2 you mentioned that are in my Senate district as well.
What are those then?
Okay, so it starts at Lake County, Park, Chaffee, Fremont, Custer, Jefferson, then Douglas and Teller.
Well, that's a big district.
Yeah.
And Mark, you've always been a student of history and an ardent believer in the founding principles of America. And at the state house in Denver, you've become a real conservative stalwart and champion for freedom and the Constitution. And the thing that people may not realize is for a conservative Republican like you, in a state that is dominated by hard left liberals everywhere from Governor Polis all the way down through the legislature and every statewide office, it can be a really tough job at times.
Yeah, I appreciate that you bring up the kind of the motivation. That's my motivation for serving is philosophical, patriotism, trying to preserve what the founders gave us, and it's intriguing to me when you get there and you find your soulmates in the Senate, in the House, that also are there to try to preserve liberty, preserve natural law, or as founders put it in the Declaration of Independence, our founding document, the pursuit of the laws of nature and of nature's God. And when you just have that's your goal, then everything else kind of follows naturally. And interestingly, the other worldview that we're up against, that includes several legislators who are there. They're single-issue legislators, and they come from a position in their own personal life, a personal experience. Like there's one legislator who was evicted. His family was evicted from their home when he was about 12 years old, and so everything that he does in the legislature is to try to prevent any tenant from being evicted from or their rent controlled and so on. Has everything to do with that. Another legislator whose son was killed in a mass shooting, the Aurora Theater shooting. So everything he does is all about gun control and so on. So yeah, the motivation that we come in with makes an extreme difference in the outcome.
Absolutely. Well, there's so much that we could talk about this year's last session at the Colorado General Assembly. Yeah, you gave me a list of bills that were passed and not passed, and honestly, Senator, it's astounding to me. It's alarming to me what's going on. The first area that I wanted to talk to you about is there's a set of laws that were passed, and this isn't new, right? This has been happening in Colorado for a long time, but there seems to be a coalescing taking place between an LGBT agenda and an agenda for the state to take over the raising of children and injecting itself between parents, undermining parental authority, and then also a state takeover of health care, both mental and physical.
Yes.
So we have a bill that passed that first off requires tracking of children from all the way through public school, even up until their career. So creating some kind of a master database, I suppose, of all Colorado citizens ultimately, I suppose, is the idea. Then we have school-based mental health, where they're putting only state-approved counselors, right? And we know Colorado already does not allow any counselor to assist a child trying to escape same-sex attraction, right? That's called conversion therapy ban. And then they have school-based health care. They want to make the school, I guess, the hub for health care for children in this state, cutting parents out of the process.
Right.
Last year or year before, Colorado says children can seek mental health care without parental consent. They can go to a psychiatrist, they can get an abortion without parental notification and consent. And now we've got this whole trans movement. House Bill 1039, I think is the number, passed this year, requires all school personnel, teachers, everyone from the teacher and principal all the way down to the janitor and volunteers to only use a child's preferred name. Like, oh, I'm Joe, no, now I'm Julie, right? And if you use anything else, it's illegal discrimination and you can be sued. Am I overstating what's happening here?
I wish you were not, but no, that's, when you take that 30,000-foot view, after you have been fighting each of these on an individual basis, and then you step back and you see what they're doing trend-wise, it becomes frightening. So this is the obvious answer to the challenge that I get when I've said publicly from the well, as we call it, the podium on the floor of the Senate, and previously when I was serving in the House, I've said it there, that we ought not to have public schools. Ought not to be government-run schools. I think it's one of the big mistakes that we've made as a society. The other one, I think, was licensing of marriage. Because once the government licenses marriages, then it tends to redefine what a marriage is, not the business of government. So I'm frankly fine with us taxing ourselves toward the funding of K-12 of education, but not to deliver education. And and this is why. So it's easy for me to justify my position, my statement, when people come at me like, you actually said that. I go, yeah, and I actually mean it. And here's why. Because it is that attempt. It's the temptation of the left that while we've got all those children under our care for several hours every day, away from their parents, let's assert our philosophy onto those children. And now, going so far, and it's just amazingly blatant, to go so far as to say, yeah, and you cannot tell your parents about this. Putting themselves, their philosophy, through the power of government, the force of government, between the parent and the child, and then to have the child keep that secret, keep their conversation secret, and even give them the authority, as you had pointed out, when it comes to some psychological advances, to say, yeah, I don't want my parents to know about this. Now, in the recent bill language, it gives the parents the authority to know about psychological counseling, but then after they're out of the room, the child the student can turn around and negate that and say, no, I actually don't want my parents to know about this. And it gets overridden. It's amazing to me. had a dentist stop in to the Capitol a couple months ago, and was advancing the idea of doing dentistry work for students in K-12 on public schools. And he goes, wouldn't it be great if we just take care of kids' teeth because they don't all can't all afford it, or their parents don't always pay attention to that? And it sounds pretty benign. And I said, no, I won't be supporting that. And he's like, why? And I go, because the school is becoming this hub for all things, all services, right, personal human services, and they don't even do the education part well. Mm-hmm. So this is the trend. This is the advantage that they're taking over.
It's to me, it's like incredibly creepy.
Yes.
It seems like we're headed straight for old Soviet Union style Marxist control over children and the raising of kids. Every aspect of life the government will be in charge of, and the parents will be slaves of the state, not the other way around.
Parents, you mean birthing people?
Yeah, birthing people, right. Well, Mark, one of the most egregious bills that got passed this year is the Foster Kids Bill of Rights. Right. That may not be the actual name of it, but can you tell us about that law?
Yeah, so when a child ends up in the foster care system, they of course will be assigned to parents willing to take them in and be there, temporary typically, foster parents. And this bill, though, requires that, or restricts the foster parents from what they can do, what they can say that would advance anything of a religious nature, or anything that would be counter to what their gender identity is. So if their original name was Rebecca and they want to be called Fred now, then those parents will be required to address that child as Fred. If they want to take them to church with them on Sundays and that child is not interested, they cannot press that on them. It's like it become a hotel, rather than their real caretaker. So, yeah, and they fought that pretty hard. Even one of the senators, state senators, stood up objecting to my objection to that and she says, hey, my son is a trans child. She goes, I would not want, if he ended up in a foster care situation, I would not want the foster parents to try to offend him and counter where he has become. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So the parents have become the enemy of the state, really, when it comes to kids. And that law, the Foster Kids Bill of Rights, now law in Colorado, says that foster parents cannot violate, they create a privacy right for these foster kids. You can't even look in their backpack, you can't look on their cell phone, you can't look on their personal computer. How are they supposed to protect these kids from predators and pornography or drugs or even firearms? I mean, if you can't even look in their backpack and their personal belongings, these aren't foster parents now. They're just, like you said, a hotel.
Well, what a great point. And I was pressing my debate in that. I recall making the point that, hey, this is shameful in that you're preventing parents, the foster parents, these loving people, from providing to them, presenting to them probably what they have needed their entire lives, and you're preventing them from learning about Jesus Christ, for instance, learning about biblical principles, saying you cannot even share that with them. That is shameful to me, and it's shameful that you want to keep them where they are instead of allow them to grow and get the wisdom of the foster parents.
Yeah. Well, and another area where the left is advancing that I think the citizens of Colorado need to know about, but not just here, because we know this, right? If it's happening here, it's going to be happening in other places. But what I saw from the list of bills that you gave me and some other folks is what looks like a really strange sort of environmental agenda to restrict the ability of towns and municipalities to have common sense zoning rules or things like that. So, for example, there was a law passed that prohibits multifamily units or cities from imposing parking requirements on multifamily dwelling units. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, and when I first read that, it was like outlawing minimum parking spaces. And I'm going, what is that? Do they mean maximum parking spaces? Not taking two? No, the idea of it is that they want to have high density, like apartments and so on, built without any parking spaces. The typical zoning locally would be for every bedroom you have to provide a parking space, or for every unit you have to provide 2 parking spaces. Something along those lines. Yeah, that's always made sense. It's always been the case, so that towns, cities can plan for parking when they're getting a new apartment complex coming in, and a bunch of people living there. Let's have adequate parking for them. Well, they want inadequate parking because the idea is to force them to not have a car, so that they have to use public transportation. Part of the utopian thought process of the left.
Wow, and there's another. Let me just look at some of these here. There's a law now that overrides local zoning restrictions and even may hide election fraud. This is prohibiting residential occupancy limits.
Right.
What is that?
So, very typically, we will have a maximum number of people, residents, who can occupy a home, or there's a maximum number for square footage and that sort of thing, so that you don't have 5 families living in a house and so on. Well, that is one of those local zoning laws that's been tossed out through this bill, and so now there's no more restrictions on how many people can live in a single household. So that accommodates especially the immigrants that are pouring in to just pile into a household. And so that can no longer be disallowed. But the other problem is, it does have an election implication to it. And that is, many times we see people have a lot of registration. You see maybe 20, 50 people registered to vote, all on the same address. And so obviously there's something fraudulent going on there. So 50 ballots are being mailed to that single address, and someone is filling them all out and sending them back. So that has become something to look for, that when people are looking for vote fraud, election fraud.
Absolutely.
And now they're saying, nope, can't look at
Here's another one of these. Local government. It says local government's rights to property for affordable housing. They give the local government the right of first refusal to purchase multifamily property.
Is that crazy?
Is this saying that local municipalities in Colorado now can step into a real estate transaction between private parties and say, wait, we're going to buy that, you can't?
That is correct. And they get the first right of refusal, as it's called, right? They get the first crack at it. So even when someone is already made an offer, they want to buy this multi-family unit, dwelling unit, then the local municipality can say, no, we're going to buy that and we're going to turn it into super dense housing.
So last year I heard, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, Davos and the Great Reset and all of that, coming out of these global elites, is this idea that we want to have condensed cities where everybody lives within 15-mile radius. And I guess it's some kind of extremist environmental, like you said, utopian view. Yeah. Is it possible that that's what's driving this kind of bizarre legislation? No one in cars, everyone in, I get in my mind, I don't want to do all the talking, Mark, but have you ever seen those pictures of like Hong Kong, or Beijing, where there's like hundreds and hundreds of these super tall buildings and all these people crammed into them, and no one has cars and everyone is under state control? Is that where we're headed here?
I guess, that's a mindset that we've seen in history, and I've never understood it. But this utopian way of thinking, what would be, as I think we spoke once before, is the 8-year-old or boy who's drawing a picture of the perfect city and so on, and it looks like Oz and a lot of tall towers and so on, and here's how everything would work perfectly. And then I think it's that mindset they never grew out of, and they just think, I don't know, but it's the opposite of liberty for sure.
Yeah.
And living wide open, and it sure kind of validates the urban and urban-rural divide, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's just. it makes your stomach get tight. It's like, what are we doing? Where are we headed here as a nation and as a country? Who are these people that think that's actually a good idea? It's pretty scary to me. Well, here's another subject, and you've already hit on it, but it's illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Colorado, Rocky Mountain state, supposed to be, beautiful and all of this, and here we are, Denver has become one of the hardest hit cities in America with this illegal immigration crisis. Yeah. With, what are the numbers, Mark? I think 42,000 illegal immigrants at the end of 2023 or something like that. And I was looking at some numbers over the weekend on this, and let me see if I can locate those here. But I think the Common Sense Institute calculated that Denver public schools in last year spent between $88 million and $220 million on services and other stuff related to illegal immigrant children and families. Emergency rooms in Denver, $48 million in uncompensated care, and the city itself, $71 million in services. Wow. And yet the Colorado legislature, is it trying to stop this? No. What does it do, Mark?
They're partnering with the Biden administration and say, if you're going to send them, we're going to welcome them. And so, this one bill is a welcoming centers. Create this welcoming to get them plugged in. You come in, let's figure out what language your kids speak. Your kids speak. We'll put them in schools. We'll accommodate them with their language. And that 42,000 number is not across Colorado. That's in Denver alone. It's amazing that the focus of how many people are coming in and to the emergency room costs. They're using emergency rooms. I've seen it. When I went into the emergency room for having broken something and going in, sitting in the emergency room and seeing those folks coming in, using it for just getting some pharmaceuticals and so on. So if that becomes their doctor, and it's very expensive for all of us.
Well, let's talk about this other thing. One other thing, I want to get to gun rights and gun control with you before we're done here today. But there's another sort of theme that I saw in the bills that were passed, and it's this idea of state indoctrination. I think you touched on this earlier as well.
Yeah.
But there was a bill passed by the Colorado legislature this year requiring the state attorney general to set up a program that provides resources to government agencies and schools and other quote-unquote organizations to help fight misinformation.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? That sounds a little bit Orwellian to me.
Yeah, 1984.
Yeah.
It's and as I said, maybe on that bill there, I don't recall which bill I was talking to, but I told my fellow colleagues, I said, hey, the novel, George Orwell's novel, 1984, was a novel, not a roadmap, because they aren't fulfilling that ministry of truth that is, and this is one of several bills that we've seen come through the system, the legislature, over the past several years, that establishes a ministry of truth. Remember, the Biden administration attempted to do that, and fortunately, the people rose up against. Well, this is happening in our public schools, in our libraries now, and so on, to where these bills are coming in and they're passing and being signed into law to where, the library has a committee, public schools have a committee, and so on, where they establish and put it out online, where you come to us and you check and see whether something is true or it's not. Well, how good has the government been? Take the COVID and vaccination things, for instance. Now they're having to say, that was not all true. We were wrong, having forced to admit that, but they want to be the standard, and that's very centralized government, very philosophically in conflict with our founding principles. Yeah.
Well, and one of the bills too that I saw was that our high schools now in the state of Colorado can award students a climate literacy certificate if they've taken enough indoctrination courses on climate change and all of that stuff. I'm wondering, do they have a certificate for founding principles, biblical foundations of America, parental rights, freedom of speech? Do we have any certificates on that?
No, and interestingly, I gave a talk. In fact, it was a 30-minute version of what I teach at Karis, every fall. But and I was teaching this just this past Saturday to a group about 35 Christian men, and in there were 2 immigrants, both from South America, and they both came up to me afterward and said, "We have never heard these founding philosophical principles that made America what America is, and really towards the laws of nature and of nature's God, and how that unfolds in the Declaration of Independence." And it just occurred to me, I thought, this is what we ought to be teaching them, and saying, hey, enjoy your time here while you're here in the U.S. Now take those principles back, because those are principles for all humankind. They're not for Americans only. That's how it's stated in the Declaration. This is for all people created. True for everyone. Take these principles back home and fix your country.
Well, Mark, I started the show by saying how important it is at the state level, but let's jump up to the federal for just a second. When Donald Trump, one of the last accomplishments in his first administration was the creation of the 1776 Commission and curriculum. Do you remember that?
I do.
And one of Joe Biden's very first executive orders was to rescind that entire and invalidate that entire program. Why would anyone be opposed to a study of the founding principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence and so forth? I mean, does that just speak volumes to you about the left's agenda and their belief system?
All the time. And I'm always reminding fellow colleagues and fellow legislators that when we stand up every morning and we give our pledge to the Pledge of Allegiance, it's to the republic for which that flag stands, not the democracy for which it stands, the republic, a constitutional republic, and that we all swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And these things they're like, that just seems to have become just a cute tradition to follow these practices. But yeah, the philosophy, the centralized utopian philosophy that we're talking about that's reflected in all these bills are obviously in conflict with that mindset. So I think they would like to overturn all that. They'd like to ignore and maybe just put that on a dusty shelf and say, let's ignore all that. I pray that Donald Trump gets reelected and he re-engages that 1776 project.
Well, I do too.
So important.
And maybe we need a 1776 certificate for our high schools.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you'd be a great sponsor for that. Well, let's talk about gun rights. Really, I don't even like to call it gun rights. It's really the right of self-defense.
Amen.
The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to keep and bear arms. That's right. And yet the State Assembly of Colorado last year entertained maybe 10 to a dozen different bills that directly infringe or directly limit the freedom of the people to buy and sell and to own firearms. Now, thankfully, some of the bills were defeated, but most of them were not. Can you just kind of give us an overview of what happened?
Yeah, so I like to think that the majority party, I'll put it like that, majority party, which controls the House and the Senate and the governor's office, they go into this thinking, asking themselves that question, what would I advance if I knew that I could not fail? And the only reason that the 3 of the 10 Second Amendment challenging the gun control bills, 3 of the 10 failed was because they scared themselves. We did not overcome them. We certainly put up enormous fight. And we were debating and showing the unconstitutionality and the challenge and how some of these are going to do just the opposite of what they're intended to do. But they hold the majority, so they defeated these bills. One of them, the assault weapons ban bill, would have made illegal the majority of weapons owned by Coloradans. So because of that, that bill was killed by them. But some of the bills, one that's most disturbing to me is...
So look, can I stop you for just a second?
Of course.
It's not that they didn't have the votes.
Right.
right? If leadership had said we're going to pass this, they would have passed it. It's because leadership said, this is a little too far right now. Coloradans own too many firearms. We got it's a bridge too far for us, but it doesn't mean that they won't try it in the future.
Right. Oh, and in fact, the sponsor of that assault weapons ban bill that would have made most long guns illegal in Colorado said when she came into the committee, and I was on, and said, please kill this bill. She says, I'm asking you to, we call it postpone indefinitely, push it off the end of the calendar. So we're, of course, going to comply with that. She gave a speech on how important she thought it actually was and intends to bring it up next year. So yeah, it's just not, it's too far for now. They intend to.
What were some of the laws that did get passed? So thankfully the assault weapons ban did not, but I'm seeing lots of restrictions here with about 3 minutes left.
Sure. One that disturbs me quite a bit is one called the Sensitive Spaces Bill, where it does not allow you to carry concealed weapons into the sensitive areas. So certainly they would include schools and so on that, but also include in that the sensitive spaces was churches. Now churches, typically, especially the larger churches, as you all know, they will have some portion of their members will carry concealed weapons. So it's not out in the open for people to see. They're there to go through church, to have church and enjoy fellowship. But just in case the attack comes, which happens, evil attacks churches. It just happens that they are ready to pull out their concealed. Anyway, so this would prevent that in a lot of places where we ought to have it. Another bill that very bothersome to me was the Colorado Bureau of Investigation authority, a centralized authority to enforce Second Amendment or gun control bills. Reason that's important and reason that's so disturbing is that most of these bills are unconstitutional, or they at least challenge the Constitution, that the Second Amendment, as you described, not infringing on our right to carry arms. Well, we rely on our county sheriffs to not enforce these bills because they deem them to be unconstitutional. We hear that all the time. And most of our county sheriffs are great at this. They'll say, okay, those people in the legislature, they passed the bill, but it's unconstitutional. I will not be enforcing it. So live your life. Well, this gives a statewide organization, law enforcement organization, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the authority to just bypass the sheriffs and enforce those unconstitutional bills anyway. So that's very disturbing too.
Yeah, another theme that's all over the place is centralized control. Centralized control. A couple of years ago, they centralized all of our elections to the Colorado City Secretary of State and took away a lot of discretion away from county election officials and everything else.
Right.
That's just one example, and we see that march continuing. I've got 1 minute left of this segment, Mark, and I just want to ask you about this. One of these bills that passed requires credit card companies to monitor, take note of, create a record for any firearm purchase.
Yeah.
So that means eventually the state of Colorado will probably have a database of every single person who's ever bought a firearm in this state, and we know that can only lead to gun confiscation, right?
Exactly that. There are two results of that we fear, and one is exactly what you described, is that it is they call it a backdoor way of collecting the registration. So we don't have to register our weapons, but this in effect registers our weapons. Any new purchase through a credit card, that credit card code would then communicate that to the credit card company, and at some point the state will say, I want that data, give me that data. The other one is just denying purchase. So if at some point they decide we want to disallow weapons purchases, then that code will say this is a weapons purchase through this credit card, and maybe the credit card company denies it.
Right, a woke credit card company. Yes. It's not hard to imagine them saying, this is against our standards. We're not gonna fund this purchase. Right. Well, Mark, we're out of time on the show, but as always, it's so good to have you with us, and we are so thankful for the hard work you're doing up in Denver.
Thank you. Let's talk happy stuff next time.
Well, we'll do that. Okay. You did get a couple things passed this year. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to cover those, but we'll take care of it next time. We're really thankful for you. All right. Well, joining me now is our good friend and familiar face to all of you, Janet Porter, the founder of Faith to Action, the author of the original Heartbeat Bill, and culture warrior extraordinaire, and just one of my favorite people on the planet. Janet, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Richard. Great to be here with you again.
Well, Janet, you have been busy. I think, I wonder sometimes if you actually do sleep. I don't think you do. Got a message from you a few weeks back on the eve of the National Association of Christian Lawmakers Conference. Normally I go to that one, wasn't able to make this one this year, but you were headed there, and you were prepared to introduce a piece of model legislation that kind of goes, it's on the same subject as some of the things I was talking to Senator Baisley about, and
Sure.
it was an effort to stop the grooming, really, and the indoctrination of our kids in our public schools and libraries with this whole satanic LGBT transgender, the whole ungodly belief system that is just ruining our children today. Can you tell us more about that bill, and how did it go at the NACL?
Well, let me kind of give the background. It seems as though, especially in this last segment, you just feel overwhelmed. I mean, they're starting more brush fires than we can put out. You've got the drag queen story hour at the county library, and the schools, they're grooming the young kids with the alphabet mafia. Then you've got the teenagers are being assigned pornography as part of their reading material. There's all these things that are going on. It seems like we've been scrambling to fight here and fight there and fight everywhere we can. And it was actually a couple of years ago, I was watching my own movie. I made a documentary called Light Winds: How to Overcome the Criminalization of Christianity. It was on the issue of marriage. And I've been praying for a long time, how is it that we can address these issues effectively? And I felt like God dropped it in my heart, much like when he did with the Heartbeat Bill. I felt like Texas Heartbeat Bill, that's the way. Because what happened with the Texas Heartbeat Bill? Well, we actually assigned a civil penalty, thanks to Jonathan Mitchell, who came up with the idea. I remember the early discussions we had. I kind of wanted to make sure that that we had the criminal penalty, that the abortionists were actually found to be felons, because then they lose their medical license. They got to stop the killing. But it turns out that giving citizens the right to sue when they violated the Texas Heartbeat law closed down the abortion mills. And so what if we gave parents the right to enforce the anti-grooming, the obscenity, the pornography legislation that's currently on the books in most states, probably even Colorado? So we actually took a bill that was originally a library bill that Jonathan Mitchell had. And I had been talking with Senator Jason Rapert, who heads up the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. And a couple years ago, we tried to get it in a special session, and I had tried in West Virginia. But it turns out that the NACL is set up for such a time as this, that you can actually introduce a bill, and unlike with the Heartbeat Bill, instead of waiting 10 years to get 10 Heartbeat Bills through, we can multiply and say, hey, everybody, here's a model. And the model of this bill says, if there is any kind of grooming, if there is any violation of your obscenity or pornography laws, the teachers and the librarians are no longer held exempt. And we give parents the right to sue. If Johnny comes home with material that violates state law, that is grooming material, then guess what? If there is grooming, a lawsuit is looming. And so I made this approach. Representative Bentley and I made this presentation at the National Association of Christian Lawmakers about a week ago, and people cheered when we said that. If there's grooming, a lawsuit is looming. They want to print T-shirts. The man, Tom Oliverson, who's running for Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives, is texting other state reps. It's now been presented in Louisiana as an idea for consideration. consideration, as well as in Texas and in Arkansas, where we believe this draft is going to happen. And I want to say personally, thank you for your input. Not only did your input get submitted with the model bill, but also that of Walter Weber of the American Center for Law and Justice, and Andy Schlafly, who was mother's renowned fame of Phyllis Schlafly, who single-handedly stopped the Equal Rights Amendment. And so we put the best and the brightest to craft this bill to say that, again, if there is grooming, a lawsuit is looming, and we can dry it up at the source. Stop the grooming. Instead of all the brush fires throughout the state, we can stop it right away at the source statewide by giving parents and citizens the right to enforce it.
Wow, I think it's an ingenious idea, and the timing of it is just awesome. And you know, here in Colorado, you heard me cover some of this stuff with Senator Baisley, but the LGBT juggernaut in this state, in league with Planned Parenthood and just general Marxists, are injecting themselves between parents and their children at every opportunity. And I'm concerned about the future of our kids, Janet, as parents are becoming the enemy of the state. And what are your thoughts about that subject? Are you seeing that around the country? And what would this proposed bill do to stop that?
Yeah, there's no question about it. What it would do is say that, you know what, how the senator talked about how they're blocking parents, that they can't know about an abortion appointment, or if they're being called by an alternative name or alternative pronouns, and all of these secrets that are being kept from mom and dad, who have the best interests of their child in mind, they're kept in the dark. Well, this bill says, the Child Protection Bill says, hey, you know what, if you don't release what curriculum you're teaching your children, if you don't show them the assignments, the handouts, all of the reading, suggested reading materials, then guess what? You can be subject to a lawsuit. So it's the teachers who better abide by this law, or they're going to find themselves in a lawsuit themselves. There was one of the things Senator Bentley did is she actually removed the exemption from teachers and from librarians in the state of Arkansas. But what happened there, Richard, is that the court came in and says, oh, no, you can't do that. But the brilliance of Jonathan Mitchell's approach is they cannot do a preemptive lawsuit. That's what, that's where they can't, stop it from being enforced. It's a civil remedy. So the federal courts cannot come in and prevent it. So the beautiful thing about this is it brings parents back into the center of their child's lives and gives them the ability to enforce their upbringing in the way they see fit. And if there's violations, as we see every day in America's schools, they now can do something about it. Finally, it's a way to stop it at the source.
Well, yeah, and Janet, the question, as lately I've been thinking a lot about this whole leftist agenda that we're seeing in America today. And when you contrast that with the history of our country, with who we are and used to be, and with our founding principles, what I'm seeing is just literally a satanic assault on the fundamentals of God's created order. And I just would like to go kind of biblical with you for a minute here. When we read the Bible, it says God created us, male and female created he them. God said, be fruitful and multiply. Jesus commented on that, and he said, what God has joined together, let not man put asunder. The union of marriage, how sacred it is in God's sight. And the Bible clearly says no sexual relations outside of that marriage covenant are permitted. And he also said to us, take dominion over the earth, right? And replenish it and subdue it. And it seems like from the wacky environmentalist agenda of condensing everybody into cities with no cars or anything else, all the way to getting rid of parental authority and making children raised by LGBT czars in the state. It's everything is against God and against God's word. Am I missing this, or do you agree with that?
It's spot on, Richard, because everything at the core is spiritual. It's the only way to explain the things that are happening. You raised the question, hey, why would Joe Biden be against the 1776 to teach the kids the curriculum of our nation and how we were founded? Well, look at the spirit. You've got one side that is to give you life and life abundant, and the other side is to kill, steal, and destroy. And you can see which side the parties are now aligning on. You can see where these policies are going. things that don't even make sense. You know, you and I have been fighting to get the truth out on college campuses with our airplane banners to bless Israel, to say Jewish lives matter. But why would the LGBT QRSTD agenda, why would they be pairing with the pro-Palestinian, the pro-Hamas, the Hitler Youth of today, when if they move to one of these countries, if Hamas had their way, anybody who engages in homosexual behavior would be killed? So it makes no sense except to say, at the core, you have God and you have the enemy. And the enemy of God is the enemy of God's people and the policies that are being pushed. You know, I remember being in D.C. and they said, yeah, they're trying to get rid of the parking, a big portion of the parking in Union Station. I'm like, that makes no sense. Why would they do that? They're trying to force their agenda, the World Economic agenda, that we own nothing and we're all happy and we're all in some sort of a high-rise building in the inner city with no cars, and eating bugs. It's appalling. You know, one thing the left's got right, and this is something the senator said that I think is right, we need to dream with God. What we too often do is react, we respond, we defend a shrinking piece of real estate against the onslaught of every single one of these agenda items. I think the better approach is to dream with God and say, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? They're doing it. Why don't we do it? That's where I believe the heartbeat bill was birthed, when instead of just, stopping the funding and maybe protecting babies that are born alive, or all of these things around the edges, let's get to the heart of the issue. If a heartbeat's detected, the baby's protected, and we save 9 out of 10 out of the gate with the heartbeat bill, which again was once the ceiling, it's now the floor, the bare minimum that we can pass, and that's something we're gonna push for in Congress. But the same is true with this anti-grooming child protection bill. We're going to stop it at the source, statewide, giving parents the right to enforce it themselves. Because if Johnny comes home with any of these things that they're being denied, what books their children are taking out at the library, if they're inviting a drag queen in to read to small children, grooming them into this lifestyle, then guess what? They're going to pay for it. And that's the same thing that happened with the abortion industry. And I remember thinking, is this really going to work? And I had people call the abortion mills in Texas when the Texas heartbeat bill was not struck down by the Supreme Court, when it was enforced, even before Roe fell to the ash heap of history. I called, and we made the phone calls, and they said, no, we're not doing them. We're not doing them. After 6 weeks, we will not kill your children, essentially. And it all comes down to the money. And I didn't realize. I mean, I wanted to make them felons. I'll just be honest. I wanted them to lose their license, their ability to kill. But it was the civil penalty that was, I believe, the most effective in this regard. And as the heartbeat bill protected them in the womb, this child protection bill will protect them in the classroom. Now, I don't want to oversell that this is the next heartbeat bill, but it very well could be.
Well, I know that it's still under review, and we're still working on tightening up some of the provisions of it, Janet. But for people that are interested in it, or especially for any state legislators out there that are interested in it, is there somewhere they can go to get more information, or do they just need to be patient for right now?
Yeah, well, if you come to my website, Faith to Action, or the shortcut F, the number 2, the letter A.org, we have, and actually it was a program we did here at Truth and Liberty, live from the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. We spoke with Representative Mary Bentley from Arkansas. She's the one who's spearheading this in the state of Arkansas. She's got all of your comments, the other attorneys. We're drafting the bill right now. We will have a model very soon, but check with us. You can just reach out to me and hit the contact button, and we'll make sure we get back to you with the most recent model that we have that I believe is going to pass in several states. And I don't think we're going to have to wait a decade to do it, because parents are fed up. All of these things, it's like you heard of the fire hose of the first half of this program. This evil, that evil. They're teaching your kids that. They're keeping parents from this. And we've just got to stop it. This is one way to stop it. And that includes, by the way, we mentioned Planned Parenthood and all of the abortion and the gay clubs that are coming in the schools. Well, guess what? If you are an invited speaker coming into the classroom, if you bring in Planned Parenthood to tell everybody how great abortion is, or how wonderful it is to engage in premarital sex, well, guess what? That's also grooming, and that will also be, you'll be accountable for that, so that the schools themselves who invite the out of school speakers to come, out of classroom clubs to attend, if it violates state law, well, if there's grooming, A lawsuit is looming, and that's the beauty of this. And we're, as you're talking, I'm like, I'd kind of like to add this whole climate change agenda in there too. But we did first things first. Let's get the grooming stopped, and we'll go from there.
Well, let's talk about Israel and the whole banner project, the I Stand With Israel thing. That's another brainchild of yours that just sort of erupted a few weeks ago. And man, what an amazing thing, as you were flying banners over college graduation, outdoor stadiums, and things like that all over the country. Tell us about what happened and where we are in that whole initiative.
Sure. It's just, if you remember when they hoisted the Palestinian flag at Harvard, well, at Harvard graduation, when they were there at Harvard Yard in the open air, they had to watch for 2 hours a banner fly over them. It was an 8-foot Israeli flag with our tagline, JewishLivesMatter.us. That's our website that we threw together it all came out of a text thread. And I'm like, who are the coolest people I know? And you made the cut, Richard. You were on the text thread. And it just so happened you weighed in to help to get this done, because we not only flew over Harvard's graduation, over University of Michigan's graduation, we were at the UCLA, which, by the way, when we were there, we actually flew. I said, give it another hour. Let's go another hour and fly over Hollywood while we're at it. So we did that. We were at USC when Sean Foyt was there. We had the Jewish Lives Matter T-shirts, so we handed out about 400 of them thanks to Patriot Mobile. We also flew, of course, we began at Columbia, where this whole thing really was I think sparked. That was where the whole thing began. And so now we're looking at NASCAR races, and we're looking at other venues where we can take this pro-Israel message. One thing that Jim Garlow said in the program we had here last week is that he met with the president of Israel, with other parents of hostages, and one thing he said, he told every one of them, is that you do not stand alone. We are flying banners over universities, over large venues where people will know that you are not alone, that JewishLivesMatter.us is the website. And he said people were in tears, knowing that, in fact, I got a letter from a rabbi who said to me, it's so comforting to know, I'm an Orthodox rabbi, he said, but it's so comforting to know that this time, when the anti-Semitism is rising once again, this time we are not alone. And that means something. And I think that's going to send a message. In fact, I talked to one of my supporters. He says, my father is Jewish. He wants nothing to do with Christendom, anything to do with Christianity. And he said, I sent him your emails so that he could say, this is what it's like to be a real Christian. We stand with Israel and the God of the Bible. And that is I believe, building a bridge to our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community like nothing else.
Oh, I tell you, it really gets to me, Janet. I think that is so awesome, and I'm sure, I can only imagine like Jewish students sitting and families sitting in those graduation ceremonies as they look up and saw that banner flying over, and what that must have meant to them. Because what happened on our college campuses is over the last few months is just incredibly shameful and incredibly revealing about the state of our education system and the inroads that the Marxists and the God haters have made into our culture. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And do you have any future plans for it? Is it still ongoing? Can people support this initiative?
They sure can. The website is JewishLivesMatter.us. We did try to get at University of Texas. The weather shut us out. We tried to fly over the Jewish University with the message, "We've got your back." The weather again prevented it. But we are looking to go to where the people are. Some have suggested horse races. Some have suggested NASCAR. Certainly, I'd like to see us at the Republican and Democrat conventions as we stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel to say, "Look up. You are not alone," and we take that message to the airways.
Well, I'm a baseball fan, so this is baseball season now, and there'll be Major League Baseball all over the country, so maybe we could get some there too. So anyway, you guys go check that out on the website again, and it's JewishLivesMatter.org. Did I get that?
Dot
right?
.us.
.us.
A little unusual, but that's what was available. By the way, we've looked into Major League Baseball. There is one downside. You can't fly when the game is being played. You're cut off to an hour before or an hour after. So that's a little bit of a kink in it. But that doesn't mean we can't be there. As people come, very often they have their tailgate parties, and as they get ready for the game, they can still see the message. And so we're looking into that as well.
Well, that's awesome. Awesome stuff. So, guys, check that out. Well, Janet, let's talk about the life issue for a minute, can we? I know there's been some setbacks, over the last couple of years since Roe was reversed or overturned. That there were a lot of advances made quickly as trigger laws and other things came into place, and many states passed new restrictions, heartbeat bills, other great laws. I think we have now at this point, maybe you know the numbers, 25, 28 states that have restrictions on abortion that did not exist while Roe was on the books. So we've made a lot of progress, but the left is pushing back. Where are we in the fight? And I know the Supreme Court a few days ago ruled in favor of the government on the abortion pill FDA challenge, but it was really a standing argument. It wasn't on the merits. So that issue, I think, is still alive if we can find the right plaintiffs for it. So, but where are we? Can you update us?
Sure. Last time I counted was a little while ago, but we had 20 states that were either full protection from fertilization or heartbeat, which is 9 out of 10 babies. So it's or both. 20 states. And so the case that I'm making to those who are right now contemplating, should we change the Republican Party platform, take the pro-life plank out, that would be a grievous error. Let me explain. Those states that are protecting children in this country, or until the ballot initiatives come to attack that, but I'll say that it ends up being 210 electoral votes. Do not pick a fight with 210 electoral votes. That's not the battle. You don't want to turn your back on your base. And so that's one battle. We've got to make sure that Republican Party platform is at least as good as it is, or it gets better. That's one issue. But on the ballot initiatives, all of these states that are facing this assault, and what it is, it's an unconstitutional attempt to change and to repeal 50 years of state law. Because as Senator Baisley said just before I joined you, he talked about how we pledge our allegiance to the republic for which it stands. We don't have a direct democracy. This is not two wolves and a lamb voting for what to have for lunch, where the mob with the most money wins. No, we have a representative form of government, a republic that we can, through our elected officials, have the hearings, the debate, all of the issues vetted properly to decide what laws we pass. What's happening with these ballot initiatives is they're bringing in out of state millionaires and foreign billionaires that are deciding how a bill becomes a law. They're the ones making state law. There's a problem with that. It's unconstitutional on its face. You're the lawyer, Richard. What is it, Article 4, Section 4? We're guaranteed Republican form of government?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
hey,
well,
I
don't know the citation, but the Constitution says that Congress shall guarantee to every state a Republican form of government. Yes.
And that's what's being denied. In Ohio, it happened in Michigan. They're now, they've got the crosshairs of Arkansas, Florida, of course, and we're praying and we're working. But generally, it's tough to beat the blood money that they have at their disposal, where, you've got again, foreign billionaires that came. We had the notorious partial birth abortionist Martin Haskell give money to try and repeal all of our state laws, the partial birth abortion bans, one of the first bills I worked on. This is something that needs to stop, and we're going to be addressing it in the courts.
Janet, thank you so much for joining me today. You're always amazing, and what you're doing is so fantastic. So we'll look forward to having you back on the show real soon. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching. Janet, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining today's Truth and Liberty livecast. You can watch today's and past livecasts in our archives at truthandliberty.net. Our goal is to educate Christians and connect them with resources and organizations to help them impact their sphere of influence. You can help us accomplish this by making a donation at truthandliberty.net/donate. Join us next time for more Truth and Liberty.